similarities is that they are both contracts. We're selling a contract, which is essentially a promise to pay when the client has a member whose claims are catastrophic. And catastrophic could be different depending on who the client is. So in the case of stop-loss coverage, if it's employer stop-loss coverage, the client might be an employer, could be a retailer or a service provider, and the coverage we're providing is perhaps promising to pay for all claims that exceed $100,000 in a given year. Compare that to a reinsurance program where our client is an insurance company. When our client's an insurance company, that's generally a much bigger population than a single employer. And there we might have a deductible of, say, $1 million. And so we would pay, the reinsurance contract would pay for claims in excess of $1 million for a year. So the primary difference is, are we insuring another insurance company with a lot of members, or are we insuring, say, an employer with a smaller number of members? From a reinsurance point of view, once we know how likely they are to happen and what the cost is going to be, they're not very different. In fact, they might even be more predictable, because a gene therapy typically has a defined price tag, maybe $2.5 million or $3 million. So the only hard part is estimating how often it's going to happen. Whereas for a burn victim or premature infant or something, they could be in the hospital for a week or a month or several months, depending on the severity of their condition. So we have to worry both about the price and about how often it's going to happen. The trouble comes where they're different is where we need to cover in our reinsurance or stop-loss contract, we need to cover therapies that are not approved by the FDA yet, but might become approved during the coverage period, during the period that the contract is covering. When the therapy is not FDA approved, usually we don't know what the price tag is going to be. And we also don't know what the indication that's approved by the FDA is going to be. So we don't know how often it's going to be prescribed. We don't know how receptive the patients will be to receiving it. So it's very difficult to estimate both how often it will happen and what the cost will be. Thinking about the impact on stop-loss and reinsurance, I'm thinking about it from the payer perspective. So from the payer's perspective, they're purchasing coverage for catastrophic cost, typically for reinsurance, say in excess of $1 million. Let's just use that example. For Medicaid, there are not very many other reasons that you could get a claim over $1 million. For the most part, because Medicaid payment rates are low compared to Medicare and commercial, for the most part, you're only going to get a claim over $1 million if you have a premature infant who is hospitalized for several months, which does not happen very often. Now we're adding gene therapies into the program, which could cost $2 or $3 million. It doesn't take very many gene therapies to outnumber the premature infants. So it would be easy it's easy to imagine that the price of this reinsurance coverage for Medicaid members could double or triple or more over the next few years, because the gene therapies will have such a big impact compared to what's already out there.